Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a horror film from the United States, English language, released in the year 2019, directed by Alexander Aja, and this film is called Crawl. So Crawl is about this woman. She is a fantastic swimmer. She's in college, she does a lot of swim races, and she has a father that she doesn't really see a lot of, is that the parents are split up, and so she wants to connect with her father a little bit more, but she just can't. So one day there is a weather warning that a hurricane is fast approaching, and so she wants to actually find out where her father is and before she goes, and so she travels to his house and she can't find him. And so as the storm starts to get worse, she realizes that all of a sudden she's stranded. So as her quest to find her dad starts to intensify, she then realizes that she's not alone inside this house, and that her company might in fact be something that she could never have imagined. And so the nightmare is about to go from bad to worse, and what happens at that point on is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Crawl. Coming into this movie, I really didn't have any expectation. Now, Alexander Aja, I believe, has a lot of ability. He's a very talented director. He created a French movie called High Tension. Now, that was a really bloodthirsty film that really took the world by storm, and since then he has got the attention of the United States. He's gone over to the United States and he's made a lot of films. I really like The Hills Have Eyes remake. I believe that was actually better than the original, but that was basically the only American film of his that I've liked. I thought Piranha 3D was laughably bad. There's a number of other films of his that he's been involved with. Case in point, P2, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous. He made a film called Horns with Daniel Radcliffe that I thought was okay, but it just lacked what made him really good in the first place. And what made High Tension so good was that it was just the brutal nastiness. It was the French extremity. It was basically sticking the middle finger up at what decency is, and so everything that Americanized films are. And so when he's come over to the United States, I felt as though he's a sellout, is that he kind of lost his style. And so I was coming into Crawl with little expectations. This is out in the cinemas in Australia. I went with my brother, and I didn't expect to like the film. And at the end of the day, I will say that this movie does have positives, but unfortunately they're far more negatives. Now, it's not me just going on a hate crusade against Alexander Aja, but I just feel as though it's not really demonstrating what he is capable of. And so Crawl, to start with, it looks very good. Now, this is something that this director has never lost, is that the cinematography is excellent. I thought the overall storm, the way he produced this storm, was fantastic. It looked really authentic, and it almost looked like a surreal nightmare. And so this storm is coming in, it's a character of its own, and what this storm brings with it was truly ghastly. And so this is like a man versus creature type of film, and there's so many creature features types of movies that are absolutely fantastic. And so the overall creatures in this film, the alligators, is basically what happens, is that these alligators come in and basically lay siege upon this house. And I thought that the overall, the look of these alligators was fantastic. They were very big, they were very menacing, very aggressive, everything that you want from this type of movie, something to be scared of. And so combined with the really good cinematography, that surreal, almost nightmarish environment that Alexander Aja creates, I thought was fantastic. There were some scenes that were quite violent. For an Alexander Aja film, it was lowered down a little bit, but it was violent enough, is that it wasn't really focusing on the violence so much. Is something I can applaud, is that, okay, High Tension was focusing a lot on the violence, whereas in this movie it's more about the situation of suspense. And so I can applaud that, is that he's actually trying to create the things that are very hard to do. But unfortunately, the hard things to create in this film, the suspense, are really dampened by the fact that the characters weren't very likable. And this is ultimately what you need from a suspenseful movie. You need characters that you can really root for. I just didn't buy any of what these characters had. I thought the actors involved in the film didn't really have too much to play with. So you've got the main character, who is this swimmer. There's a lot of convenience to the story surrounding this character, which I can overlook that, because it is a fun horror film. It's supposed to be a fun horror film, but I just thought that with putting a little bit more depth and maybe emotional connection within these characters, I could have actually cared a lot more when these horrible set pieces were happening. Basically, to me, this was just nerve-wracking set pieces, putting yourself into the shoes of these characters, as opposed to actually caring for these characters as one of your friends or family. And so I believe that if you can actually nail what it is to be a good character, you can nail what it is to be a really good suspenseful film. But unfortunately, the character development just doesn't really go anywhere, and I didn't really care for anyone. They were just basically cannon fodder. They were just food served on a plate up to these alligators and how they were going to be dispatched. And so when the movie starts to progress into the final set piece, you've got these characters that you don't really care for, and so you're not really on as much of an edge of your seat as you really could have been. And so that was something I didn't really like. And the other thing I didn't really like is that there's a lot of suspension of disbelief in this film, is that it's not very realistic. And when you've got a character who you don't believe is really going to get hurt by these alligators, this is another problem that does eliminate a lot of the suspense. And I'm not going to go into detail about what happens, but I thought to myself, well, this is not, this is getting a little bit silly. This is getting a little bit ridiculous, and this is everything that is wrong with horror films, is that you have this suspension of disbelief. You can't connect it to it on a realistic base. And I thought, as a realistic film, this would have been terrifying. Imagine being in a situation where you're at the mercy of these alligators. But when you start to have movie theatrics thrown into the film, and that suspension of disbelief, then you start thinking, oh, I'm watching a movie, I'm not watching something that could really happen to me. And so yes, it is nerve-wracking in the horror set pieces, but for me it's just an exercise in creating tense moments based on the fact that it's putting you into the situation. But because these characters, I never felt too much fear for the main characters involved, I just didn't really get that scariness that I thought it really could have. And so there are alligator/crocodile films that are a lot better than this movie, but I will say, as I said, it is very good to look at, but I just think Alexander Aja just missed a trick a little bit, because a lot of what the movie builds in a very positive way is weighed down a little bit by the negatives that come with it. And so overall, I didn't really think it was a great film. A lot of people are going on about how fantastic this movie is, but for me it looks very good. There are some fairly good horror set pieces as far as suspense, but the characters are extremely forgettable. There are situations that are really, really silly, and it just goes down to typical sort of popcorn horror film, which is exactly what it wants to be. But I just thought to myself, as that Alexander Aja could have made a better film if he really put his mind to it and actually creating emotional connection with these people. So the acting was decent, didn't really have too much to play with. It's all about these really dangerous alligators coming into the mix. And so if you like that type of thing, I would recommend it. But I just thought as though, okay, it is a fairly silly way to spend 90 minutes. But as I said, it's self-aware. It knows what it wants to be. But I just thought as though it could have been a lot better. So overall, for Crawl, going to give this one 2 stars. It is very well made. There are some likeable moments, but unfortunately the negatives weigh it down to prevent it from being a good movie. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.